Hi, I'm Camille. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm an environmental studies major. So the topic of my capstone internship was climate anxiety and its relationship with environmental education and activism. So as a member of this major, I've become really familiar with climate change and I've seen a lot of the impacts that it's having on the physical world. But beyond these physical changes in the environment that we all are witnessing, there has been an unforeseen impact that climate change is having, and that's the toll that it's taking on the mental health of people. So a lot of recent studies have actually been looking into how people are experiencing worry in response to seeing these effects of climate change. And if you've ever felt this worry, you're definitely not alone. In fact, there was a recent study that looked at about 10,000 youth around the world, and they found that about 60% felt either very worried or extremely worried about climate change, which you can see here in figure one. This has been something that's been getting a lot of traction in the news and in research in the last few years, and it's called eco anxiety or climate anxiety. And I was really drawn to this topic because, as a person in this major, I felt this worry. You wonder if you should even have kids. What's the point in composting and recycling if, we're going to see such major changes that maybe this won't be preventable. So that's why I really wanted to explore this topic during my capstone internship. I wanted to see if there's a different way that we can educate children to motivate these students to become involved in activism while simultaneously preventing eco anxiety. So this is really critical for us to understand because widespread participation in climate activism is going to be really paramount in this fight against climate change. So to go about exploring this topic, I did intern with UW Bothell and Cascadia College sustainability programs on their Common Cause for Sustainability podcast. I created a joint mini series with my partner, and I explored this topic of eco anxiety, and he explored environmental ethics. So this was a really unique experience where we were able to find different professionals in the field to interview. I spoke with a UW faculty who's also a philosopher in residence at an elementary school, a founder of a climate activist group, a president of a village tribal council, and a climate psychologist. I really wanted to find this like differing group of professionals to speak with so I can kind of see all the different ways that they see climate anxiety impacting activism. And I wanted to pick their brains about how they think we can best educate kids. And then moving on to the results, some of the main things that I found my guests saying is that we really need to reframe our education. We need to create a space of inquiry for kids so that they feel like they can ask these big questions about what's going on in the world. And we need to not shoot down those questions. Honesty is a really good policy, but you don't want to lie to these kids, telling them everything will be okay. You don't want to avoid the topic. You want to be honest. And you have to also recognize, though, what age they're at. So you're delivering this kind of these news about what's going on in a way that's not going to scare them. So I have two quotes down here that kind of depict what my guests were saying about this. And one of them said that the challenge becomes how to respond to the child in a language and emotional tone that matches the child's situation so that you're not overburdening them with information or one's own anxieties. Another guest said, our idea is to cultivate a community of philosophical inquiry where the students can think philosophically about the questions that are important to them. We come in with prompts, the students ask the questions, and we facilitate a discussion. Another result that I found my guests talking about was this idea of generational thinking, which is a type of thinking that creates perspective and it looks to the past and the future. It takes into consideration the impacts that our actions today will have on generations of the future. One of my guests alluded to this type of thinking in the prevalence in Indigenous knowledge systems. So using knowledge from the past can help how we shape our actions. This type of thinking also ties into kind of alleviating this eco anxiety, looking at how this is such a big picture can help us not stress on the tiniest of details. So this third quote kind of depicts this saying, we actually had already pioneered it, engineered it, figured it out 10,000 years ago, and we lived it so efficiently that you can't even tell we were there. And we lived in a good balance for all those years, and it's going to take that kind of knowledge to find balance again. And so as for kind of how my guests talk about alleviating eco anxiety, they actually suggest activism as a way to ease these feelings. Being surrounded by people that are also worried about the same issue and that are also making steps towards stopping climate change could in part reduce this eco anxiety. So this last quote I have here is from one of my guests that talked about this. And they said, get publicly engaged. This is how I satisfied anxiety. I go to sleep knowing that I'm doing everything I could possibly do to change this trend of climate catastrophe. And so these are just little snippets of the conversations that I've had with some of these guests. And if you want to hear the full conversation, this QR code will take you to the podcast episodes. And so moving on to the significance of these results can help motivate the push for better support for children in education. And to establish the support, we really need to provide teachers with training on how they can foster these open spaces that allow children to explore these emotions. And in my research, I also focused primarily on eco anxiety, but there are a lot of other eco emotions like eco anger and eco depression, and those can also impact whether or not people are more inclined to get involved with climate action. So further research should look at that relationship between those other emotions, um, and the effect they have on education and activism. And so one of my biggest takeaways from this was, and that I hope that you all have gathered as well, is that you're not alone in any feelings of climate anxiety. There are a lot of other people out there feeling these emotions as well. And I would like to say thank you to my site supervisors, Kristen and Stefan, my faculty advisor, Gary, my partner, Ben, and all my friends and family for all of their continued support.